Alrighty, so we're about to have a conversation that me and my brother Luke here, the creator of the Stylist podcast, had a couple nights ago. I was walking around, I made a video basically 2 days ago, and what came to me is that I wished I had actually recorded what we were talking about, and it's in regards to podcasting. And I wanted to start off by saying, because we're not going to go deep into the whole backstory and all that, we'll be shooting a podcast actually later this week. And I just really wanted to hit some of these key points that you really helped me nail down when we were talking. And the first one was, I'm just going to ask you about it and you can expand on it as you wish. The first one was about fire, aim, ready instead of ready, aim, fire in terms of starting a podcast. And how did that come about? Because I know there was a story behind that for you.
With doing anything that requires commitment, perfectionism tends to get in the way of progress. And so in the past, I had this tendency to always want to get everything just perfectly lined out, everything in a row, have a perfect blueprint of what was going to happen. And then I thought, once I have all of the pieces in place, then I click go and start. And that really is born out of fear of something going wrong or something not working. And so when you're starting anything from the position of fear, it puts you in an energy of weakness and failure before you've even begun. Not to mention it just stops things from happening because things are never going to be perfect. You're never going to have every piece in place to where you're like, now I can just relax and launch whatever the thing is, So years ago, this would have been going on 12 years ago, I had an idea. I was a fashion stylist at the time, which means I dressed celebrities and stuff for music videos and red carpet and all that kind of stuff. Hollywood gig in the industry, as you well know.
Yep.
And for those watching or listening that don't know. And then, we hit the recession in 2008, and that's right when I started the business. And the reason that I started the business was, and I didn't know it was a recession at the time because I didn't watch the news, so I had no clue. But I was just like, this is weird. No one's calling, no one's emailing to book me as a stylist. It really started to slow down, and when I did get booked, the budgets were really small. So, had this idea that I could start my own independent school, or really more like a boot camp kind of model where I could do these weekend courses and teach people how to do what I did. Because I had started going to real estate courses and kind of like how to flip houses, make quick cash. I was going to these weekend seminars and I was dropping $4 or $5 grand for a weekend, and I'd look around the room and be like, there's 250 people in here, and I start doing the math and go, wow, these guys are cleaning up. And they have information that's hard to get elsewhere, especially for someone who's busy or already has a career or path that they're on. They can't just drop out and go to business school or get their real estate license or something like that. It's not always practical. So I observed that there was a gap in the market in terms of there was nowhere to go to learn how to do what I did. You had to know someone that just hired you and sort of groomed you and grandfathered you into the industry. There really was no degree for it. There was no education available for it. So that's on one side. You have this this lack of opportunity for people. And then on the other side, the number of people that started to learn what a stylist was exponentially growing all the time because it became kind of a mainstream fashion career due to, reality shows coming out about stylists. And
there was a growing demand for
it? The first 9 years of my career, I'd tell someone I'm a stylist and they would say, oh, well, do you do color also? Like they thought I cut hair. And I go, no, a fashion stylist. Fashion stylist? What's that? I go, oh, you dress people. What? It's just this whole thing. But once it's a hit TV show, the show was called The Rachel Zoe Project, which crazy thing about it is that show launched the day after I did my first class, unknowingly. Just the fortuitous nature of it. But anyway, before I did it, I saw that there were no options for people that had talent and even had money, but there's just nowhere to learn that. I saw that there was all these people that wanted to do it. And then on the industry side, the industry was really hungry for emerging talent and up-and-coming new talent because the budgets had shrunk, so you couldn't afford to hire paid assistants, so you needed to hire unpaid interns. But where are you going to get interns that don't just ruin your life due to their lack of experience? So there was the industry needs newbies. Newbies want into the industry. There's no way for those two to ever meet. And so I saw that there was an opportunity there for me to train the people, then introduce them into the industry. And it was a success. eventually. But what happened, back to your point, was that I had this great idea, and I even thought of the name, School of Style. I was like, shit, that's a good name. Schoolofstyle.com. You know, I saw the business cards and the sign and maybe a brick and mortar someday. And I really had this great vision. But months went by and months went by, and I couldn't finish the PowerPoint. I couldn't get my website up. I didn't understand social media. You know, I didn't have the workbooks printed. I didn't know how to lay them out. And so there was all these missing pieces that prevented me from announcing it and letting people buy tickets. And I one day told the idea to an entrepreneur friend of mine, this guy Hector, who was a, you know, kind of a bootstraps real estate investor, house flipping kind of guy, entrepreneurial spirit, you know, a real renegade. And I said, hey man, you know, my career slowed down. I have this great idea for my own boot camps. I'm going to call it School of Style. And he said, oh, it's a great idea, man. Do it. You're going to crush it. I ran into him months later, and he said, how's your school going, man? Did you have your first class? And I was like, well, no. He said, what? You haven't done that yet? That's a great idea. And I said, well, I have to get the workbooks ready and the PowerPoint. He said, nope. He said, you're never going to do it if that's the approach you're taking. And so he went on to explain. He said, Luke, and I'll never forget this, you know, things people say to you in passing that just mean nothing to them. It's a meme, you know, that they picked up or thought of, just a brief principle or thought. And he said, Luke, the way you're going about this is the ready, aim, fire method. That's the worst possible method when you have an idea as an entrepreneur. So if you want to get this done, you have to change your method into the fire, aim, ready. In other words, you just pull out the gun and boom, and then you figure out, like, did I kind of hit the target? Where was I off? And you correct from there. Or that was his way of putting it. To me, is kind of, you know, waiting to jump off the cliff until you open the parachute. But you can't jump off a cliff and survive if your parachute's already open. You got to jump and then in midair go, oh, where's the thing? Yeah, the thing's right here. Okay, boop, and you pull it, poof, and you drift down to safety. So that's a principle. Not that I've followed it that well in my own case with other projects and things. I ran into some stumbling blocks that were very similar starting my own podcast. But that one really stuck with me. And it's this, again, the principle that I'm going to arrive, this fantasy that I'm going to arrive at some point where I'm 100% prepared, and that's going to determine my success. Meanwhile, all my competitors are whizzing past me half-assed, launching their shit and being successful some of the time, you know? So the new paradigm, the new idea is get kind of the way there, just take some initial step, and then once you start, it builds the inertia and the momentum that makes you keep going. And in terms of, you know, the podcast that you're going to do, not you want to do, the one you're going to do, the words are really important too. Not, oh, I'm going to try to do this thing. No, I'm going to fucking do it, or I'm not going to do it. Yeah. Period.
I've been really trying to watch myself with the word try.
Yeah, I know. No,
try.
I've been trying.
It is very...
I guess you could get away with it past tense. I've been trying, especially if you were successful. But let me you know, wrap that up and then get to your next question. But I ran into the same situation again. I'm now, I don't know what it would have been, probably 8-9 years into my fashion school. I had retired from being a stylist, so my sole source of income is this School of Style business that I still own today. Now it's an online school and largely automated. It doesn't take, you know, a whole lot of time. It also doesn't grow. You know, if anything, it's in a process of kind of receding now as a result of lack of, you know, a team really working on it, but it's still there. But I was dissatisfied with that because my true passion, as you know, has been for 23 plus years of all forms of healing and personal development and, you know, biohacking and meditation and mindfulness and breath work and sound baths and plant medicines and just all things consciousness and just evolution. I'm just about evolving as a person. And that's what I was always doing in my free time and in my personal life. So I had built relationships in the health and wellness industry, some pretty high level ones, just as a fan, kind of going to conferences and stuff. I had a body of knowledge and experience, but I didn't know how to translate those relationships and that knowledge and experience into a brand or a product or a service that I could then make into a career. And so I decided that the most likely method of success for me to break into a new industry was to start a podcast, because I knew a lot of people, I had knowledge, I'm don't have difficulty talking, as you might have guessed at this point in the conversation. Turned one question into a 45-minute diatribe. But at any rate, I had this idea for the podcast. I thought, I've been a stylist dressing people and making them look beautiful on the external for all of these years, so I'm going to call my show The Life Stylist, and I'm going to teach the listeners how to build a lifestyle from the inside out, right? And so it was kind of a play on my prior career, etc. So it was another pretty good name. So then I set out to do it. And so I recorded about 15 episodes, and I was raring to go. And then I learned that it's commonplace for a podcaster when they're new to make their premiere episode, number one, their life story or an introduction as to who they are, what they're all about, and what the premise of the show is.
I keep seeing that over and over.
The who and the why, really, there, right? So I'm just going to come out like, hey, so today I'm talking to Cody Storey. You're like, well, who the hell are you? And it's just, I don't know. I don't think you have to do it that way at all. I mean, it really doesn't matter, because if I look at my downloads now, some 3.5 years later, going to my 4th year, no one's downloading episode 1 from I don't even know what year it was, 2000, I don't know. I have to look.
Was it 16?
16, yeah, 2016. It was 2016, yeah. I mean, maybe 3 people a month download that, and 200,000 download the rest of them, so it's like, it doesn't matter. But anyway, in the beginning, but I had never sat down and talked to a computer before, which is what you do when you do solo shows, or even just your intros, outros, your promos. It's you alone in your studio, staring at your computer screen with a mic in front of your face, trying to have the same sort of rapport with the microphone that you would talking to a person live as we're doing now. So it was really difficult for me to launch, because I couldn't get over the hurdle of like, how do I do that? And am I going to sound smart and funny and cool? Are people going to like me? It was all of this self-worth stuff that came up for me, and just the tedious nature of getting it all down, and like, how do I get someone to edit it in case I screw up? Can I talk for an hour straight about my life story and not mess it up? And I didn't understand the editing and things the way I do now. When I turn in my files now, my audio files, they're a train wreck. And then when you hear the show, you have no idea. I sound brilliant. Hopefully, at least I'm not making mistakes and going, God damn it, and punching my desk or something, which I do some of the time. I get so frustrated trying to do the solo ones. So anyway, problem with my podcast was I was still doing ready, aim, fire, because I was going to get all these episodes recorded. I had the name, I had the URL, I had all the things, and I thought that once I had all of those done, that I was going to put it out. But I still found something, subconsciously or consciously, to stop me from putting it out for like 6 months. And these interviews that I had done, those 10, 15 interviews, they had started to kind of go stale, because current events change, things change. And
time's moving on.
Yeah, somebody's talking about, and my book comes out today, and it's a year later. And you're like, that book came out last year. When was this shit recorded, Yeah. So, and then I started to get emails from a couple of the people I had interviewed that were like, hey, when's that thing out? And I'm like, oh, oops. And so I finally just had to sit down, and I made a script of my life story, and I broke it into like little paragraph-sized chunks. I think I practiced it once and recorded it and listened back to it and, fine-tuned it. And then I sat down and recorded it, and then boom, I put out 10 episodes in 10 days. And then I finally launched. And I think the lesson in there is twofold. One is that you have to use fire, aim, ready. Just do your thing, then clean it up and fix it afterward once you see what went wrong, But the other one was, the thing that I did right that time was I recorded all of those episodes with the other people before I even technically had a show out. And there was no way, I locked myself into that. In other words, I painted myself in a corner, because I wasn't going to email those people and go, you know what, I'm too scared to do my first solo show, so I'm not putting your interview out. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
That was embarrassing.
Not going to happen.
I locked myself in with School of Style in the same way, I just realized, because I didn't have the workbooks, I didn't have the PowerPoint, I didn't have social media, I didn't know what I was doing in those ways. And so what I did was I put ads on Craigslist. Hey, want to be a fashion stylist? Click here, and PayPal me $250. And I had some like 12 kids sign up for my first class.
I remember that.
And I had the money in my bank, and I was like, damn, I just made a couple G's. I'm not giving that money back. I spent it on rent or whatever. And then it made me learn how to make a PowerPoint and lay out the workbook and find a printer and get it printed in a little binders and all that stuff. So it's like, in the process of accomplishing a launch of any kind of something new that you're scared about doing, what I find to be the most useful is you just do some of the hardest parts of it and do the parts first that make you finish the rest of it out of just self-embarrassment, if nothing else, especially if you do something publicly. You know, what was I going to do? Like put these ads out for the class and then email everyone, oh, here's a refund for your PayPal. Sorry, I can't do it because I can't figure out how to make a workbook. It's just, I was locked in.
Yeah.
So that's the principle of fire, aim, ready. You jump off the cliff, then you figure out how to work the parachute.
Just looking back on this conversation that we had, I saw where this was coming from was also the term that you mentioned to me. It sounds like, because I was telling you about the ideas and the concepts and some of the things that I was doing, and you told me, you said, sounds like there's a lot of paralysis by analysis going on. So could you speak to the paralysis and analysis kind of like you're doing right now a little bit more?
Yeah, it's the same thing. It comes out of our insecurities and fears that if we don't understand exactly how the whole thing's going to work and have the entire thing from start to finish mapped out, that we can't start it. And so I really think it's a procrastination mechanism. It's again, at the root of it is fear. And it's that I'm going to keep analyzing it over and over again, thinking I'm going to get to, erroneously thinking, I'm going to get to some level of understanding or clarity and have such an ironclad plan or blueprint. Then I'll feel like, now is the time. I'm ready to really roll up my sleeves and launch and do the thing. But things don't get done that way because there's always further levels of analytical data that you can arrive at. In other words, there's the degree with which you can analyze something is infinite. So you can just go in circles trying to figure the entire thing out. So when we're talking about your podcast, it's like, well, I can't do this thing until I have a name, and then I want to figure out my, listener avatar, and then write a list of all the guests, and you could keep going on like that and plan the most perfect hit podcast that's going to blow Joe Rogan out of the water, and no one's ever going to hear it because one has spent so much time in the analytical morass of perfectionism and trying to get it all right. Whereas for me, as I started to get caught in that, as I said, when it came to my solo show, when it was the interviews, I decided I'm doing this podcast. I got the name on Libsyn, iTunes, whatever, and then I started banking interviews. Without really having a full idea of what the show was going to be about, what it's going to be like, the music, who's going to edit it, who's going to do this or that, like the branding. I just knew the name, and I knew the first few people that I thought I could get to agree to the interview. And once I did that, it forced me into doing it. But I think so many of us, we don't know how to piecemeal a project. You look at this giant whole pizza, and you're real hungry, but it's like, oh man, I can't eat that whole thing no matter how much I want it, no matter how much I want to devour that. It's just like, I can't stuff that whole thing in my stomach. Well, that's not how you eat a pizza. You get a little wheel cutter and you cut slices of it, and maybe you cut half a slice, if that's the best you could do, right?
And then it's bite by bite
from
there.
Yeah, exactly. And so if I'm sitting there analyzing, for hours, how am I going to fit this 15-inch pizza inside my mouth? Now my mouth isn't big enough to fit that whole thing, it just gets ridiculous. Maybe I could put it in a blender, It's just it's a trick of the mind to procrastinate inevitable vulnerability and the potential for failure. So I'm going to find ways to not do the thing just in case it doesn't work, rather than doing it imperfectly and at least having said, well, I did it. It's just, perfection is the enemy of progress. It just really is, because nothing's ever going to be perfect. It's never going to be ready. My podcast still isn't perfect. There's a bunch of things I always want to change about it, and I fine-tune as I go. But God, what if I was still sitting around going, oh man, how am I going to do the first solo show and tell my story? It has to be perfect.
There would be no show.
I bet if I listen back to it now, there's a bunch of ums and ahs, and I probably swear more than I would like to now at this point in my life, and there's presumably gaps in the story that, oh man, I should have told this story or that one, or I have a different level of understanding about my own life or the way that I live or the world at large that I didn't have in 2016. So was it perfect? No. But does it matter? Not at all. Because I put the goddamn podcast out. And then again, that led to the next step. Okay, so I have a podcast out. I have 10 episodes out. I'm on day 11. What do? Dude, you got to promote it. And then so I start ramping up my social media game and learning about that and taking courses and hiring people to, grow my Instagram and whatever.
Could you talk about the launching a little bit? Because I know that was a part of this discussion as well. So that's going to be more like the marketing, right? And getting your brand out, brand awareness, and your message out. The other thing that I've heard people discussing is you got to get this strategy in place for the launch. And you mentioned like just get 15 interviews done, and then one interview a day for 10 days. Because I was thinking, well, maybe I should launch, an interview per day for at least 20 days. Did you find that to be true for you? I know your story is a little different than some of the people I've been, going through as far as their information on their approach to podcasting. What's your take on the launch protocol, so to speak?
I haven't asked that many of my peers how they started, but I of course know how I started. And the reason that I did 10 shows in 10 days, and I probably had another 5 in the can, like another 5 weeks worth, because I elected just to do 1 day a week, Tuesdays. It's always been Tuesdays. Always will be Tuesdays. Never missed one. Never will miss one. But the reason I did 10 in a row is I was working with Dave Asprey, the founder of Bulletproof Coffee at that time, as a business coach. And so we would do these Skype calls periodically, and I told him, hey man, I'm getting out of fashion. I want to get away from that industry, and I want to work in health and wellness and start a podcast. And so he gave me the advice. He said, well, you want to hit iTunes with as many downloads as possible within the first couple weeks of your release to try and get in the new and noteworthy. That's like the holy grail, because people that are just scrolling through the iTunes podcast app, they're going to be like, oh, what's new? I'm kind of sick of my podcast. Or they'll be recommended for them, or you get in the hot, the Hot 100 or whatever.
So if you get downloads, it's kind of like a free boost.
Yeah, in podcasting, it's all about your iTunes downloads. That's what you're based on. Just like if you have, if you're a musician that has a record, it's like how many albums did you sell? If you're YouTube, it's how many YouTube views or subscribers do you have, etc. So it's all about downloads. And the idea there was to kind of game the algorithm in iTunes and get my show in the new and noteworthy and get it some attention and legitimize it by putting out 10 shows, because that's going to be 10 times the amount of downloads you would have had, presumably. When I did it, I don't think that it really did anything for me. I've never been terribly visible in iTunes. I think most of the time I'm probably in the top 200, if not 100 in the health category out of, tens of thousands of podcasts. So I'm in the top 3% of all podcasts, but still, there are podcasts that, by the covers of them, and when I look into them a little, they're super corny and like not well produced, and this is my opinion, and they're in the top 20. So I don't, the iTunes rating system is totally bizarre. They don't tell you how it works. It's really kept very cloaked. It's a proprietary algorithmic system that they don't let you into, so no one really knows exactly how it works. Because based on some of the bigger guests that I had in the beginning, the fact that I put 10 in a row, I had a decent audience at that time to promote it to. The fact that it was still just ghosted and ignored, even though I followed that strategy, tells me maybe that strategy is not the be-all, end-all. However, so it didn't do much for me in that way as far as I can tell. However, what it did do was it made my podcast look more legitimate, because it was 10 weeks worth of content within the first, you could say like in the first week. Yeah. So then when I went to other people, I want this guy Cody Storey on my show. 2 weeks into the release, I could be like emailing you, hey, my name's Luke Storey. I've got a podcast about health and wellness. So far, I've had Dave Asprey, Ben Greenfield, da-da-da-da-da. I can name like 10, or maybe a few at least, decently known names. Then you're going to get that email and go, oh, he's had all these people on his show. It makes it seem like it's been around longer or it's more established, even though it's only out for 10 days. So that worked for me. Also, just spending those months developing relationships, personal relationships with all those people that were on the show helped. And also, I got a boost in the beginning by saying, hey, your show's out today. Then I emailed the next guy the next day, and the next one, and the next one. So they got 10 days of emails. Then they start sharing that into their web of followers. So there's an amplification, because I'm being smart about the guests that I book and trying to get guests that at times have a big audience and a wide reach and are also good at marketing, and everything they do, they put it out everywhere, you know.
Yeah.
So they're marketing my podcast for me. So I think from that standpoint, having a few in the can is good marketing wise, although it didn't really seem to do much for me in iTunes in terms of a rating or visibility. Another thing it did though was enabled me to develop the habit of always batching out all of my content way in advance.
This is what I wanted to get into next, was the batching and the production side of things.
So that got me in the habit of having 15 episodes in the can, and let's say I put out 10 in 10 days. I'm still 5 weeks ahead. I don't have to do any interviews for the next 5 weeks, but I would keep going. And I always like that feeling that in my Dropbox, I know it's one folder, it's called Podcast to Edit. And in there is where I put the fresh interviews, and there's a folder for each guest. And in there at any given time, the whole time I've had a podcast, I would say I've always been at least 8 to 10 weeks ahead, like a couple months, but at times even 3 or 4 months ahead. So I'll go to a conference, I'll record 10, 12 podcasts in one weekend. That's 10 or 12 weeks worth of content. Come back home, I stop recording. So I like to record in concentrated periods. I'll do 2 episodes a day. I'll have people come here to the studio, 2 episodes a day. I'll do that for like 3 days in 1 week. I'll do that for a couple weeks and just bang a bunch out. And then people hit me up, hey, I want to do the podcast. I'm like, sorry, I'm on hiatus until June. And they're bummed. And it's whatever, because it's my life, and I have to develop and cultivate a workflow that I can be consistent with. So having those interviews in the beginning batched out helped me learn how to batch interviews. Then systematically, as I've developed the show and my own workflow, I've found that at times there's other elements that I'm doing on the show that get bottlenecked, and now I'm at my deadline. So something I used to do, for example, was I used to write my own copy for the intros, maybe be 2 or 3 paragraphs of, this is the guest that's on today, this is what we talk about, etc. And I would handwrite it based on my recollection and notes of what we talked about in that interview. And I hated writing those goddamn intros. I just hated it. But I didn't have anyone on my team that could do it in place of me that I didn't hate worse. So it got to this point where my show comes out on Tuesday, as I said. It got to this point where I would put it off on Thursday. I'd put it off on Friday. Saturday, I'm going out. It's the weekend. What? Sunday? I'm definitely not working on Sunday. Monday morning, I forget. I get busy with other shit. Monday night, I'm like, oh my God, I haven't written my intro for tomorrow's show, which is the blog post and the thing that goes in the, in the podcast app for that episode. And that started to get so frustrating that I'm like, I don't think I want to have a podcast anymore. I don't like this.
So you were behind the gun too much.
And then, selecting the images for the graphic designer, recording all my intros and outros, because I do those custom for each episode. Some people just kind of have a canned, especially the outro. Most people just have a canned one they use over and over again. When I get new sponsors on, cutting those promos, all of those things, doing them piecemeal really eats your time, so you become an operator in your business rather than being the owner of your business. So the more I can batch out the tasks that I'm responsible for when it comes to putting out my content, the more I can dedicate a certain period of hours or a couple days, and that's all I do. I don't do anything else. Then I don't have to do one of those tasks again for 2 or 3 months. So it's been a systematic process for me, batching out every little thing that I do, so that I'm doing that same thing a bunch of times in a row. So let's just say, say I've got 10 episodes in the can on the calendar, the interviews are done, but I haven't done the intros. Instead of doing those every Monday night, last minute, I'll take one Saturday, and all I'll do is I'll record, it doesn't take me that long, but I'll dedicate however many hours in one day, and I'll do those 10 intros and outros for those 10 shows. And then I put them in Dropbox, and then those shows are done. They're handed off to the production team, and all I have to do then is post it on my Instagram, which I plan to outsource. It's been a tough part of the funnel of the content to outsource, because I'm particular about the copy and
the way things
what
are written,
thumbnail is used and where it goes in the grid. I'm working on it. I'll get someone to do it. It's not smart for me to be. Would I pay someone $500 an hour to do Instagram for me? No. Then why am I doing it? Because I'm worth $500 an hour. Let's just say. I just pick a number. Sounds good. Probably too low. Really.
Yeah.
You know. So that's the batching. But the other thing is, and this is what I was telling you the other day, is, dude, the number one goal if you're going to start to create content, and this would be true of content that requires a team of people to actually put it out, you know, to make it,
to produce.
Yeah, to produce it and to put it out and market it. You know, so let's just say like a YouTube channel, a blog to a degree, but more so like video content and audio content.
And like repurposing.
All that stuff, okay. Yeah. Social media team that cuts up bits and pieces and makes a tweet and an Instagram post and a YouTube trailer, promo, whatever, right? So in addition to me being able to batch, it's been a systematic effort to outsource every single piece of my, not just my content, you know, my entire brand and my all my operations really, but let's just keep to the podcast, to the content, is any single thing that literally only I can do, I mean, except the things that only I can do, someone else has to do. No matter how much it's going to cost, no matter how much I think I can afford it. What I can't afford is to be the guy writing my own show notes. Am I a show notes writer? Is that my job? No. Am I a video editor? No. Do I want to be a video editor? Hell no. Am I an audio editor? Nope. Am I a graphic designer? Nope. What am I good at that no one else on my team can do better than me? Interviewing people.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and conceptualizing and planning.
Yeah, I wrote down creative visionary.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, if you love editing, then great, do your own editing. But imagine what you could do with that energy if you were thinking about new brands that you could work with as sponsors that are going to pay your bills, how you can be more effective in your marketing to increase your downloads, which increases your ad revenue. You know, how you can really craft your interviews in a unique way that really connects with your guests, that leaves not only impression on them so they want to come back and they want to share that interview because it wasn't some generic piece of shit that someone didn't put any effort into, but how can you craft your interviews so the people listening are glued to their headphones? You know, those are the things that I can't get someone else to do for me.
Yeah.
Someone can't be me sitting and doing the interview, or even doing, you know, as annoying as they are for me personally, the intros and the outros, and, you know, in the beginning of a show, getting someone hyped and like giving them a good snapshot of what that show has to offer, and then, you know, in the outro, making sure I do all the proper plugs for my events, or leading people to my website or my Facebook group, or plugging my sponsors, like doing the business part of it to, you know, express gratitude to the audience and be like, hey, if you enjoyed this, here's a way you can give back, you know, share it with a friend for free, go to my web store, I get some commission, you know, that's my time to like frame the monetization to the audience in a way that's really authentic and transparent, and I feel really good about, and based on my conversions from my affiliate accounts and stuff, they feel pretty good about it too. But anything and everything that can be done by someone else must be done by someone else. So for someone like you that's in the first stage and you're getting over that perfectionism shit, the fire, aim, ready deal, then the number one goal to me, in my opinion, would be get your revenue to the point where you can break even on your production team, so that you never have to touch an edit, you never have to make a graphic, you never have to edit video, you don't have to write the copy, you're not doing the show notes, the bullets, putting the hyperlinks in those show notes and bullets. All of that shit is really tedious, takes a lot of work, and there's probably someone better at it than you that will do it for less than whatever your hourly rate is that you determine your rate is.
And might actually enjoy it because that's their strength.
Yeah, and they're passionate about it. Some people love writing and researching and looking things up and, you know, formatting documents and like building websites and stuff. I don't like that. Nor do I like setting up mics, setting up cameras, tripods, plugging shit in, changing the batteries, moving the lights, looking at the shot, which I've always done myself. Finally, recently, I followed my own advice. If I ever do an in-person interview, there's someone over here doing all that shit. I just sit here on my ass until the person walks in and we start talking. I'm not like getting up, clicking record, doing any of that shit, you know? And yeah, I mean, I pay someone $25 an hour to sit here. Some of my interviews start to finish are 4 hours. Whatever. that interview is going to be way better if I'm not stressed out because I see the red light flashing on my video camera that says the battery's dead, you know,
Mm-hmm.
or the shit gets cut off. When I do it myself, half the time it doesn't even work out. So it's
So you're actually saving energy, saving time,
yeah, but
and there's more of a guarantee on success, not having to go back, reshoot, refilm, or,
yeah,
you know, put somebody in a position where they wasted their time.
yeah, which has happened to me doing it myself. That's the thing, when I travel sometimes it happens. I went up and shot a video / podcast in Oakland recently, and the video didn't come out. I don't know. I had everything right. I don't know what I did, but I came back and I got the data card and I threw it in my computer, and there was just my format of my camera breaks it into like 4 gigabyte chunks. So when you have a video, it's in all these parts, and only the first part was there, and it must have died or something.
Yeah.
Now this guy's not, you know, he's not going to sweat me because the main content is my audio. But then actually I checked the audio and I'd forgotten to pack one little adapter, so I had to use my lav mic that was the sound for the video. So that's going to be the podcast. And as we were talking about earlier, there was some interference. It was like,
Yep.
I mean, I'm hoping it's usable. But that's what happens when I don't have help. Now, I did go on Instagram on my way to Oakland and was like, hey, I need like an amateur AV person just to back me up. I paid this kid $100, but he didn't know how to use my equipment, or, you know, I didn't think it out ahead of time enough. However, having that experience, now I put into my kind of my SOP, just it's a mental one at this point, but it should be documented somewhere, is that on my calendar, whenever I have an out-of-town podcast recording, that my VA / show producer is responsible for hiring me a qualified person where I'm flying to do my recording, to sit by my side the whole time and do everything.
And key thing, qualified, knowing how to run what you are
Yeah,
using.
so she's going to look at their work, their resume, whatever, find me someone that's affordable. So, you know, I'm always systematically ferreting out anything that someone else could do. So between batching and that, I actually start to enjoy what I do more, because when I find myself stressed out and taking on too much of the tasks that should be outsourced or batched, then I'm like, I hate my job. I don't want to do this anymore. I get burned out. And if you're a content creator and that's how you pay the bills, you do not want to get burned out, because what the hell else am I going to do?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is what I'm really passionate about. I love learning from people, and I love helping people by sharing my knowledge and, you know, transmitting the knowledge of my guests to as many people as possible. That's like what gets me up in the morning. And if that sucks to do because of all the auxiliary bullshit that's required to support that mission, I'm doing it to myself. I'm making it suck because I'm like, oh, I don't want to spend $3,000 a month to pay a team to put out my podcast. I could keep that money. Yeah, I could keep that money and hate my life and not grow my business, because I want to be the guy that's putting up the tripods to save $25. See what I mean?
And if we don't enjoy what we do, it then impacts our interactions with people we're either interviewing or trying to help. The level of quality, based on my experience, was that when I was dealing with burnout, I wasn't looking forward to showing up and being of service and helping, you know, because I was so weighed down. The classic book, The E-Myth, you know, that book, that was like what I became, and that's what ultimately got me to shut down my business, which put me in this position to be actually in this chair doing what we're doing today. So it was a gift in disguise, but I think a lot of people can identify with that. Like knowing what it's like to get involved with something you once loved and were passionate about and enjoyed, and then all of a sudden you got stuck being the operator, doing everything, wearing all the hats, holding all the plates up, and the next thing you know, you're looking around saying inside like a mantra, I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. I do not enjoy this. And then what happens to the business? It starts to decline. I'm not able to put that amount of love and passion and curiosity and level of service out there because I'm so worn down by all the things I've got stuck doing that I shouldn't be doing if those aren't my strengths, if those aren't the things that I truly do enjoy and that feed me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really identify with that piece, because I heard you when you were talking about it. I was like, God damn, that rings true to me so much right now.
Well, the other part of it too with the delegating is that you really have to let go of control and perfection. I'm honestly, I mean, as objectively as I can say this, very way higher skilled at writing my show intros than the person writing them right now. And if he ever sees this, God bless you, you're doing great. But because it's me, and I'm older, and just I think better at writing, at least better at writing that. He might be a better novelist or whatever, reading children's books or I don't know what. But I read those things sometimes. I'm like, oh my God, this like really, I could write this so much better. But the thing is, I have to really be honest with myself. Is that part of the whole flow of production of this content really that important? Like, is somebody reading? Do you listen to podcasts and go to the website and find, each podcast typically episode has a blog post, right? Do you go there and like, let me see how these guys wrote about this episode. That paragraph right there has a couple run-on sentences. It's like, it doesn't really matter, Especially, it was hard for me to really let go of that control and perfectionism because I post those on my Instagram and they're written in the first person. So it's like, hey guys, today on my show, I'm talking to so-and-so, and the person that's writing, they've listened to me for hours and hours, but still they say words that I wouldn't say, or it just sounds corny. And so I would be afraid of people judging me or not getting people's approval because my little excerpt or intro on my Instagram to promote that episode is kind of corny and doesn't sound like me. And then again, it's like, well, do I want to do it? No. Does it matter? No. Who cares? Like, who cares if people are like, wow, that's corny sounding? Okay, whatever, don't listen, next. You know what I mean? It doesn't determine the success of my podcast. Or, I used to be super controlling about the graphic chosen for each episode. So I basically designed the tiles or the covers for each episode, right? So we made one template. I know the size font, the type font, like they all have the same exact look, the same layout. And then my graphic designer implemented what I wanted. And then I would have to, again, every week, I'm like, it's Monday. And I would go through and say the episode was like on brain health. I would go in the stock images websites and like, I have to find a post about, or a picture about thinking or the brain or the mind or something. And I'd sit there for hours, literally sometimes, to find the perfect image, or maybe 4 images for her to comp for me. And then I'd pick the one I like. And then eventually I realized this is so annoying. Why am I doing this? I have 300 episodes. I'm sure there's a graphic designer that can look at the images I usually pick, go to the same website where I pick the stock images, and find 3 or 4 options for me to pick that are close enough. Are the ones that my graphic designer now is doing as perfect to me as the ones I handpicked? No. Does it fucking matter? No. A podcast is not successful because it has a cool blog post image or a social media tile. And if I'm honest about it, when it comes to posting them on Instagram, they are always my lowest performing post by far, no matter who picks the image. People don't want to see episode 45. How to meditate with Joe Smith. Like, they don't care. They want to see a cool mountain or, the red light device or whatever, whatever, like some lifestyle stuff. So again, one more thing that I had to outsource. Now that said, when it comes to delegating, outsourcing, and batching, there does come a certain point that there are things that only you can do that you can't get anyone else to do that also suck.
So you're not going to like every single
exactly
aspect of what you do.
And then it's a matter of adjusting your attitude, so when I have to do my intros, because I can't have some voice actor, hey, on today's episode of the Lifestylist podcast, it's supported by blah blah blah. Like, nah, that's old school radio. It has to be me, Luke, the host, going, hey guys, I'm really into reishi mushrooms. The best ones to me are Four Sigmatic. They're awesome because of X, Y, and Z. I take these things every day. I got you guys a discount. Here's the code. Here's the URL. Hook it up, man. Support the show and support your own health. Bing, cut, No one else can do that without it sucking and making my show crappy. So I got to do it. Do I like doing that? I hate doing those things, literally. And I don't use the hate word often. That's like a swear word to me. But that's just the reality. I would say reframing that could be historically, I have not enjoyed cutting my intros and, the sponsor plugs and stuff. So when I'm doing it, what makes it suck less is batching it out and just banging it out all at one time. So I can tell myself, Luke, you just got to do this for 2 hours. And then you're done for 2 months. I can do 2 months worth of intros and promos in 2 hours. And I tell myself that. And then I also will sit there at my studio mic and go, Luke, You could be scrubbing toilets at LAX right now. You could be shoveling horse shit on a ranch in Montana. You could be on and on and on. You get paid to sit here in your own studio, smoking CBD joints, drinking the world's best biodynamic coffee, you know, sitting at my red light therapy. Oh, I'll take a break and go hop in the $20,000 hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Then I might take a sauna and an ice bath, come back, record a little bit. I mean, you can't really have a better life unless you were completely retired and, you know, living on total passive income or had a trust fund or inheritance or something. Like, you have it about as good as it gets. So shut your mouth. Well, no, don't shut your mouth. Open your mouth, sit your ass down and record your fucking promos, you know, and I just get through it. There's way worse things that I could have to do. But all of those tiny little steps is what makes you, I think, what creates longevity, as you were saying, that you can stay in love with what you do. And so now when I have a kid come over here and set up all, you know, now look, I got 3 video cameras, 2 social media streaming devices, 4 studio lights, however many mics we're using, my little recorder, and we're talking like 10 things that have to be set up and monitored and charged and plugged in. Just not doing that enables me to sit down and like be so stoked to talk to whomever I'm talking to. So it cost me $125 to not do that shit. That episode's going to be what percentage more engaging and passionate, and how much more on point and focused I'm going to be. 50%, 70% better? How many downloads is that one going to get, and then increase my downloads and ultimately my listenership and then revenue, had I not been all stressed out trying to save myself $125? You know, so it's thinking big picture. I spent $125, but if I keep doing bomb-ass episodes, my ad rates will go from 600 a plug to 1,000, and then I'll get up to 2,500, and then next thing you know, I'm making a few grand off every episode and living the dream and providing people with amazing value and information. So those are all the things that some of the things that I've learned to keep myself in the game and also still enjoy it.